The answer to that is, I did the Marigold Hotel because it was totally different to any other reality television show. As you know, it's a different demographic. The people who watch it are not expecting people to have to eat grubs, and they're not voted off. And there's no real confrontation. I liked everybody who was on the programme. I didn't have any problem with anybody at all. And I don't think anybody else had any problems with me. Nobody had any problems with each other. So it's just the kind of the demographic of the people in the group as well. Everybody's over the age of 65. And when you get to that age, I just don't think you feel confrontational at all about anything like this. It's a case of just trying to make yourself look as best you can within the framework of what they want you to do. So it was very enjoyable. I loved the colour. I loved India. I loved the things I was expected to do. A lot of it was cut. Of course, they didn't have room for everything. I did quite a lot of stuff for Easter, which was not shown, but it nevertheless was a great experience. And if they asked me to do another one of some description, I would be very happy to do it because it's not cheap and nasty. Well, the answer to this is there was no pressure from anybody for me to do anything at all. There was a natural reticence when I turned professional in 1968 to be fearful of the future because I didn't know what I was going to end up with. And in those days, it was very important that you didn't throw yourself on the unemployment lists. You know, it was really difficult, and also it was a massively ambitious project. That somebody like me who weren't talking about going into show business, I was just making a living as a folk singer. So it was very important that I had some sort of systems in place when I came back from Denmark, which was why I became professional in the first place, was to go to Denmark. And I did go through a very difficult time to begin with, but once I started to play in folk clubs and get a few bookings, I was all right. So no, I didn't get dissuaded. I never thought, once I got over the financial hardships of trying to make ends meet, then it was okay, and I never thought that I couldn't make a living. I mean, becoming famous was a different matter. You asked me what made me turn professional. Well, it was purely because I wanted to go to Denmark. And I wanted to do that 6 weeks of shows in the Vice Versa House in Copenhagen, and so that was very important. And without giving up my job, I couldn't do it. It was as simple as that. I went to become from working in folk clubs to becoming a household name. That is, of course, very, very important. I became a household name in the mid-1970s, and I became very successful at doing that. I mean, I think it's like what they used to say, like the curate's egg, good in parts. Things about my career when I was a pop star were really great and really interesting, and other things weren't. It's very, very difficult to be a successful person in a very successful industry, because like any other product which you are, people want you to do much the same as what you did that was successful. So there's always this pressure to do something that other people think will be really good for you and make you lots of money, and more importantly, make them lots of money. So the things that I look back on now as not being quite such a great idea were possibly the album with Mike Batt, which was a conscious decision to do a kind of compilation album before compilation albums were all the rage. That was seen as a good way of maximising my hits. That album wasn't great, all for a song. It was okay. It wasn't very creative, but it was all right. It was a bit of a mishmash. And then, of course, I had my manager, Bernard Theobald, who wanted to maximise earnings from everything that I'd ever recorded. And so when CDs came into fashion, he would not allow any of the record companies to have the CD rights, which meant that he withheld rights if they wanted to release things, whole albums, retrospectively. So this is why all these terrible compilation albums of mine came about. You know, the best of Barbara Dickson, the Barbara Dickson, the world of everything like this. So I was in the petrol stations as opposed to the record shops, and also probably one of the reasons why I became a sort of easy listening artist as opposed to the singer-songwriter that you talk of. The other thing which has become a little bit of a problem is the I Know Him So Well scenario, which was done with the best will in the world, a record recorded with the people from ABBA for a track in a musical, but because of the success of Mamma Mia, unfortunately, I Know Him So Well has also been kind of lumped into that ABBA retrospective camp, silly clothes, 1980s nonsense. And it's absolutely fine for other people to involve themselves in that, but I'm not interested in that at all. Coming Alive Again, that was a difficult time the whole time. The Coming Alive Again was a watershed moment because I was still in the pop industry, but I was having difficulty with getting myself placed in there, and I was at an age where I felt that I wanted to do more mature music. I didn't really want to be just doing pop songs. So that was a thing where it was easy to say that, but how was I going to do it? So it took me a while between Coming Alive Again, which was a singularly unsuccessful album, to going into some kind of labour of love with Pete Williams doing Parcel of Rogues, and before that the Dylan album, of course, with Ian. These albums weren't terribly successful, but they were very, very good for my psyche, and I'm very glad I did them. You will notice that there was After Dark End of the Street, which was more of the same, really good, thought-provoking stuff. There was a massive hiatus because Bernard Theobald was still trying to get me signed to big record companies who would give a lot of money for the making of the album. And I was tired of waiting for that, and eventually produced Full Circle 8 years later, with Troy on my own. Well, all I would say, first of all, is I'm not perceived as anything in the music business at all. I don't think anybody in the music business is conscious of me. The public, of course, my demographic, the people who come and see me play, are very interested in me and what I'm doing. I would say very few of the audience who come to my shows, the Barbara Dickson concerts, would think of me as the big hair and the shoulder pads. And that again is tied up with that chess stuff and I know him so well, and Elaine Page in the mid 80s, which is the camp kind of drag queen sort of ABBA thing. That's okay, as I say, for other people, but don't ask me to get involved in that or have a sense of humour about it, because I don't really. It doesn't rankle. It's just boring because if you think about it, it's almost 40 years since that happened. So no, it doesn't. If there are people who still would like me to wear shoulder pads and have great big hair, then I would give them short shrift. No is the quick answer. They're okay, but I'm not in the nostalgia business, which I'm not interested in singing songs for other people and singing those old songs. They mean absolutely nothing to me now. It's not that old songs from that time mean nothing. I mean, Answer Me and the songs that were successful for me, which I didn't write, are important, of course they are, but old album tracks are just not for me. I'm much more stimulated by looking at material to develop, which is very important and always has been for me, looking at songs written by other people, which I like and I will respond to, or songs that have been written by myself. That's what I want to do, and that is what I will do forever now, if I'm permitted. Well, not good management in my particular case. I think my management sort of, it worked against me to some extent, because I think I would have been seen in a slightly more serious context if I hadn't had my management hadn't been constantly trying to make me successful in inverted commas. But to be fair to Bernard Theobald and management in general, that's what they're there for. They're there for to make you successful, and that means making money, and that means advising you against doing things that they think would be unsuccessful. So there's some of that going on, and looking back now, I would say some poor decisions. I think that I was reasonably well established at what I could do when I became famous. By the time I did John, Paul, George, Ringo and Bert in 1974, I could sing and play pretty well. And I developed a little bit as a songwriter during that latter part of the 1970s. And of course, when I was a pop star, people just said, don't do those songs of yours anymore, because nobody's concentrating on that. People are picking up on the things that are hits. So I gave up those things. But I think I could sing, play, write. I understood music. I knew what I was doing. I had a degree of intelligent charm, which people have stuck with, and I was very good at what I did. So, I mean, I think if you are all these things and you do have a degree of tenacity, you won't be ignored. I mean, Kiki is a very, very good case in point here. She went completely away from being a successful, slightly, plugging into that Los Angeles stuff. She got away from that, came back, sorted herself out, and has taken things at her own pace. And I really think that's about right. And she's great, and I like that. And I do like Elkie Brooks very much as well. Elkie Brooks is more low key as well, and I think it's just keeping yourself low key. I had no acting experience, and if it wasn't for Chris Bond, who came to train me to be Mrs. Johnson in Blood Brothers, I would never have been able to do it. And if I'd worked with other people, they wouldn't have been able to help me to do it. I don't know, you say, did I feel accepted as an actress? That's an interesting way of putting it. No, I don't think I was ever accepted as an actress, but I was an actress. I could do it. I don't care what people thought about whether I was accepted or not. I never felt of myself as an actress. I always felt of myself as a musician, always as a musician. The fact that I could act, and in Mrs. Johnson, brought something to that through my family connections with Liverpool, and the great writing of Willie Russell and the help of Chris Bond. Those were the things that made me do it. And that's why with Spend, I wanted to do it, because although it was a totally different sort of thing, I knew I could do it, and the music was so good. Well, I think stage fright is all tied up with being top of the bill. It's all to do with being absolutely wonderful and having to sustain your wonderfulness all the time. Judi Dench is brilliant, and that is that's one of those things. I mean, you can't do anything about it. If you are loved like Judy, then every time she does anything, there might be someone out there going saying, "Oh God, she used to be great. She's not very good anymore," and that kind of thing. But few people will do that. And when people love you, and they do love you, and they know you're serious, and they know that you're a hard-working person who hasn't got some sort of inflated idea of themselves, you'll be okay. But my stage fright is okay. Now I don't really have it anymore, but if I was asked to sing at the Oscars, I probably wouldn't go because I'd be absolutely terrified, and I would be more worried about having the right dress and stuff like that, which is rubbish, so I wouldn't go. But I'm not saying I wouldn't like to sing the song that won the Oscar, but I wouldn't like to perform there. That's not the way I'm driven. Oh, I don't know. I don't think there's a similarity here, really. Baker Street was an entirely different matter, and it was a global success, totally different to I Know Him So Well. I think if Mamma Mia hadn't happened, then I Know Him So Well would be a totally different animal to what it's become. It's got lumped in, as I said earlier, with the Mamma Mia camp drag queen karaoke, women in pink limousines drinking prosecco world that is extraordinary to me. I don't understand it at all. But therefore, that's why I'm very reticent about I Know Him So Well. I don't connect with it because when people ask me to connect with it, they're not asking me to connect with the song at all and its merits. They're asking me to connect with the shoulder pads and the big hair and all of that stuff. And I don't celebrate that. I, for some reason, find it deeply embarrassing. So, I don't know, I'm not certain either about what you say about Baker Street and Gerry's addictions. I think I knew him a bit better than that would suggest to me. Gerry's legacy, I loved him dearly, and I have been a champion of his music since he died. You're absolutely right, and will continue to do it. There's talk of me doing some sort of performance-based thing based around Gerry's music, but we haven't got round to that yet. But I would still like to look at it at some point because somebody needs to do something to mark the fact that he was a very, very important songwriter and we all loved him. Yeah, because um, he didn't want that massiveness of attention that he was getting because he was a global phenomenon, and he didn't see himself that way. He didn't want to do that because I think he found that if he allowed the business people to take over his life, he would be lost forever. And I think he was probably quite right. I mean, unless you're someone like Lady Gaga or Madonna, who seems to thrive on being the most famous person in the world, there are very few people who want to do that. And also, they tended to be in control of it, whereas I don't think Gerry and I would have been. There would have been powerful management in there, sort of not advising us particularly well. But I would never have wanted to be Lady Gaga or Madonna anyway. It's not for me. I actually didn't part company with him until 2006. And by that time, Full Circle had been released and had come out and was a seminally wonderful work, and I was delighted because it showed what I could do with the right sort of nurturing and help from, say, Troy, and that was done with no reference whatsoever to any management or any record company at all. Bernard did he did a lot of good things. He, of course, I remember doing a lot of things that I didn't particularly want to do. He was in business. He wanted to make money out of me, and that always had to underline whatever decision was made in business. I'm not saying that he didn't care about me. I'm saying that to you because you're not a journalist. A journalist would probably say he showed no regard to me as a person, which is not true. But he was a bit of a pull yourself together merchant, and I think he thought that the thing I needed to do was get back in the saddle. If I was feeling that I couldn't get back in the saddle, I don't think he thought that was really true, whereas it was. So I eventually gave up working with him in 2006 when that we had a fallout over something comparatively minor, and so that was it. I've not had another manager since. For agency, I used the lovely Angie Becker at Kennedy Street, who helped me with putting Marigold together, and Strada for the work with that I do with Nick. So that's great, and I love that, and they're lovely people, and I can work with them, and I feel very comfortable. And when I go on tour, I've got Liz as a tour manager, Liz Woolnough. So I know my people, I love my people, I know them. And everybody in my life who works with me, I know and I trust to be well behaved and not be stupid and take the mickey out of me. It was interesting. I didn't know that the Telegraph said it was the finest album of my career, but I think it probably was, because it marked a huge sort of journey, the end of one journey which had been done in the full glare of the public spotlight and in the music business, in inverted commas. And suddenly I wasn't in the music business anymore. I was completely in control of something. It didn't matter. It wasn't being made to be successful. It was being made to feed my soul, and Troy knew exactly what I needed and wanted from it, and he and I together made it happen, and it was just it is a great album in my pantheon of the good things that I've done. It really does stand up, and I love that, and I'm so glad that since then, it's now 15 years since Full Circle, and everything I've done since has been fabulous. I haven't made a Duff album since, and the stuff I continue to do with Troy and I'm working with Nick on this one is really good stuff. The new one, time is going faster. The musical partnership, Troy Donachy, came about when we were doing Parcel of Rogues, and a man called Kevin McAlea, who played keyboards on that album, which was produced, of course, that album was produced by Pete Williams. Kevin McAlea came in and he suggested Troy Donachy as an uilleann piper because we needed someone to come and do some pipes. And I'd never met Troy, and he'd come from a band called, I think he was in Iona at the time, and he was from a slightly different world to me, sort of progressive music scene rather than in the folk scene. I knew the folk musicians quite well, but I didn't know Troy. And then he was in my band for a while, around the time that we were promoting A Parcel of Rogues, and then he kind of went off and worked with Maddie, and he did various other things, and where he met Nick, of course, Nick Holland. And And then he came back to me when I contacted him to say, do you think I could do this? First of all, I was going to make an album just before that with Rab, and that didn't work out because I don't think musically it was as good an idea. I don't think the songs, because Rab doesn't operate in a sort of folk or a Celtic world, whereas Troy most definitely does. So that's where the Troy relationship became strongest when we were doing Full Circle and the henceforth. And he has been massively influential. I don't really want to do an album without him having something to do with it. The new album is called Time is Going Faster. It'll have 10 tracks on it. I think the only well-known song on it will be Tell Me It's Not True, which we've reworked because the only version that was available really has been recorded by my band a long time ago, or the cast album version, which I never ever liked at all. So Nick and I do a rather good version of it. So we've just stripped the whole thing down and decided to re-record it, but everything else will be fairly unknown. There's a couple of things that might be slightly familiar to people, but other than that, it's going to be another voyage of discovery with some traditional songs reworked, a couple of very beautiful kind of spooky things which I love, and that's my thing. And so this will all be unveiled on the March-April tour 2021, where we'll be working on the stuff between now and then. I've still got vocals to finish. I've got some photographs to do with Brian Harris, which is now been put back again into July, and so we'll be doing artwork for that, and the artwork for the tour brochure and everything with Brian. And then I'm raring to go on the tour, so that's what the album is thinking towards. And the title is Time is Going Faster, because that is a song of mine that is on it, and it's the final song. So that seems to be written in stone, which is very unusual at this point, but it is. They included me of the 10 best Scottish voices, the Herald. So what is what I say. They don't know. They don't know who the best Scottish voices are. And, it's all subjective. And how does anybody at the Herald know who is a good voice and who isn't? They'd choose people that I would think would be pretty dreadful, probably. And they would miss out one or two people that I would think would be fantastic. So it means absolutely nothing to me, but it is nice to be selected and given the thumbs up when one could be ignored, and I'm not in that case. So that's good. I would like to be able to sing and play and write for about 15 years, but I think that is impossible. So that's the one thing that I would really like to accomplish, which is not able to happen, because every year that goes by I think, oh, this is amazing that I'm still able to be as good as this at my age, because I don't know, I'm not certain that people when they get really old can really do it anymore. In which case I'd probably like to teach and pass on what I know. If there was one thing I'd go back and change, there's all sorts of things I'd like to change. I'd like Gerry Rafferty still to be alive and writing songs and me singing them. I would wish that Mamma Mia hadn't happened, so that I Know Him So Well wasn't kind of lumped into that whole sort of wheelbarrow of mire that it is. But that's not important to me. I mean, my own biggest hit, I suppose, is Answer Me, and that is a great record. So, I mean, that's good. I've got my own songs, that I can look at as being, as having a sort of authenticity in my world. And of course, my interpretation of traditional music is still as good as ever. So, and I'm still as interested in that. So, what would I change in my career? Oh, I've absolutely no idea. I have no idea at all. I was once, Dick Gaughan tells me, almost in a group with him and a guy called Tom Smith, who sadly died. And I would have liked that to have been developed. I can't remember why it wasn't. This was in about 1968. But all in all, it's been okay. Even with the things that have been slightly embarrassing and slightly, I don't have much of a sense of humour about things that embarrass me. Yeah, there's all sorts of things. I'd like to spend more time with James Taylor. All sorts of things. I'd like to meet Paul Simon. Yeah, I would have liked to have met Elvis. That would have been good. But all sorts of things. But all in all, I think that's true. And I think singers have to give up when they're rubbish. I say this to audiences all the time. I'm always astonished that I'm able to do it. And I go on and on doing it, and it's good, and it's as long as it sounds as good as it does, and David's sound design is really great for me, then I'll keep it happening.